As oil prices continue to decline, economists around the world are looking for answers. What if oil hits $20 a barrel? Will Russia survive or collapse? You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. There are a few points I want to touch on today, so we'll move through them quickly here. This is out of the Telegraph, and we are talking about a former finance minister in Russia saying that Russia is facing a full-blown economic crisis. That's his words, not mine. And he's saying this, that the country is forced to take emergency financial measures. And this is what we've been warning about now, talking about how they may put in capital controls. I have always warned about bank runs. I've always warned about putting in stoppages from getting your money, however that works. I'll show you how this is going on today, right now, not in Russia, but somewhere else. So stay tuned. The economy has been battered by a wave of sanctions as a result of tensions over Ukraine, geopolitical uncertainty, and falling oil prices. All things that we've been discussing here. And he said this, today I can say that we have entered or are currently entering a full-blown economic crisis. Next year we will feel it in full force. So he's actually thinking that this crisis is going to get worse before it gets any better. And they said this at the end here. As for what the president and governments do now, they basically say that they need to partner up with people like the NATO countries, the West. But that is exactly what they're trying to move away from. So speaking of which, let's get on to that right away. Out of Bloomberg, China offers Russia to help with currency swap suggestion. 2 Chinese ministers offered support for Russia as Putin seeks to shore up the ruble without depleting its foreign exchange reserves. So they're not really ready to wean off of their foreign exchange so much. Neither is China, but they're doing so slowly. They're doing so methodically. They said this, China will provide help if needed and is confident Russia can overcome its economic difficulties, according to the finance minister here. And this is all part of that currency swap agreement that I have discussed here before, talking about how this is really a currency war. They do not want to use the US dollar as its reserve currency. Of course, they have a lot of invested cash in US debt, and they do not want to have to do this. They want to diversify outwards. So they are partnering up once again, Putin and the leader of China together, to basically wean themselves off of the dollar. So let's move on here to the big news. This is Gary Shilling actually saying, ready for $20 oil. Now, I'd just like to say myself, I'm not necessarily predicting that oil will hit $20. I'm just suggesting that this could in fact decline dramatically from where it is today, and that's significantly lower than where it was before. When the U.S. Federal Reserve ended its quantitative easing program in October, it also ended the primary driver of U.S. stocks during the past 6 years, something that I've said over and over and over again. They said so long as the central bank had flooded the markets with money, investors had little reason to worry about the broader economy limping along at 2% real growth. We know specifically that he's boosting those numbers. It is nowhere near 2% growth. But at least he's willing to admit more than the government is. So basically, let's go on further into the article where they get into some important information. The Saudis also seized the opportunity to damage their opponents, especially Iran, and what they see as an Iran-dominated Iraq in the Syria conflict. They also want to help allies Egypt and Pakistan reduce expensive energy subsidies as prices fall. I was talking about the Saudis. I have a big video that's around 100,000 views now, talking about the Saudis, how they could be involved in a means of having this, basically pushing the price down. Even though it makes a lot of sense right now to cut your production, they're not doing so. Something's going on here. So let's move on. What he said, then there's Russia, another Saudi opponent in Syria, with its dependence on oil exports to finance imports and 42% of government outlays. I talked about this already, how the reliance on oil, not just for Russia, but for other countries as well, and you could see how the currency falls directly in line with a devalued currency. With the ruble collapsing, the Russian central bank let the currency float in November after blowing through 75 billion to support it. Then the central bank tried to stop it by increasing the interest rates, and they did so all the way up to 17%. That is a very high interest rate, and tried to basically stop the free fall. Now they've controlled it to some degree, didn't exactly free fall, but it is down quite a bit. So we'll talk about what I wrote about in my book, something that I'm worried about to happen, not just in Russia, but in other places as well. And we're talking about different types of controls. In 1971, Nixon imposed wage and price controls. And this is similar to what they did during the Great Depression, where wages of the individuals were maintained regardless of the fact that they were not justified. You had prices maintained at certain areas, but this does not allow for any semblance of reality. You cannot control the system. It needs to be dictated by the market itself. So if we just go into that, the reason why I wanted to mention this is that we could see this happening within Russia right now. And, that is not going to be good for the actual economy, not going to be good for the citizens. Now, previously I mentioned other countries that this kind of behavior is acting in right now. Out of the AFP, Belarus blocks online sites, closes stores to stem the currency panic. This is brand new information coming out. And right here, we have a currency that is being devalued dramatically. Belarus blocked the online stores and news websites Sunday in an apparent attempt to stop a run on the bank, something that I've been warning about over and over and over again, being called a fearmonger and all this sort of nonsense. But when you look, it keeps happening to different countries. It even happens to so-called developed countries, but of course they're able to bail them out. So let's go on. As people rush to secure their savings. That's what they've done. That's what I've discussed. How people go out there and they'll buy anything as long as it's not holding on to cash, because they know that money is going to be worth less and less and less. This is going on here in Belarus. It could very well happen in Russia, and it could happen all around the world, definitely. But of course, you'll see nothing but this. Stocks rally, the Dow and the S&P end at records. Wow, this is so amazing. Out of CNBC just celebrating how well the S&P is doing. But not to go into this too much, let's just show you something about the real situation. Number of hours of work required for people in the US to buy a unit of the S&P 500 ETF. Essentially saying that it has never been more expensive to buy stocks right now compared to people's real wages. And that's what we need to realize, that yes, when you look at the stock market is increasing, but the dollars are devalued. And this is one more chart that you can look at, which will tell you that for the real situation. And this right here is just something else I wanted to show you. Pages in the U.S. Standard Federal Tax Reporter Handbook, just trying to explain to you that taxes continue to increase on people. The regulations become more complex. But then you look at the regulations that are imposed upon the big banks, the major corporations, the mega corporations. They don't have any regulations on them. They got all the loose regulations, but the individual, especially in the lower and middle class, they have the short end of the stick as always. And this is what goes to show you how this situation continues to get worse. All the rules that they put in place are only making things worse, and that is just the reality. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up, and of course don't forget to become an insider. The Insiders is where I give out all my best intel for free. That is available at themoneygps.com. Just scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.